Welcome everyone. I'm Barb Hyman, the CEO of PredictiveHire. I'm having this conversation with Jeff all the way from Melbourne, Australia, where it's late at night here, and really delighted that Jeff has been happy to be part of this webinar, and I hope you'll all get some really insightful learnings from it. So why are we here? Because on the 4th of August this year, Iceland went live with our technology, which is an AI automation tool to help with candidate screening and selection. And I think it's pretty brave of anyone to drive such significant change, particularly in a grocery retailer where they've been under a lot of pressure with a lot of different challenges to face and still face. So I wanted to really get Jeff to share his journey as the head of talent and development for Iceland Foods across the UK, and why he got to that point of deciding he needed to make radical change, and what some of his learnings have been, and obviously what the value has been for Iceland and for Jeff. So maybe if we start, Jeff, for those who only know Iceland, the country, and may not have come across yet Iceland, the grocery retailer, could you just tell us a little bit about the organisation?
Yeah, no problem at all, Barb. Thank you. First of all, hello to everyone. I'm not going to say good morning or good afternoon because I think we've got a variety of different time zones on here. So hello and welcome. Yeah, so Iceland, the supermarket chain that's actually within the UK at the moment, is one of the top 10 retailers from a grocery point of view. We are renowned for being the specialist in frozen food, as you will probably guess from the name, and actually are second in terms of market share in the entire frozen food sector within UK grocery. We have been around for a little while now. We celebrated our 50th birthday last week, on Wednesday of last week, and started off as a really small business, single store, kicked off by Sir Malcolm Walker in North Wales, and have grown significantly over the period of time through a number of acquisitions within there, but also through some extensive growth as well. We have over 1,000 locations now as a total business, and that also includes our secondary channel or offering in terms of bricks and mortar, and that is a business called the Food Warehouse. So we also implement all those solutions from a talent perspective into the Food Warehouse, as well as the Iceland core estate. So yeah, that's where we are. That's just a brief summary as to what the business is about, Bob.
Great. So a lot of people that are spread around the country, obviously serving a lot of citizens of the UK. And one thing we've all got in common is we've all been affected by coronavirus earlier this year. And I know from Australia it had a huge impact on retail, particularly grocery retail, with stores really overwhelmed and panic buying and lots of different challenges. How did it affect your team? How did it affect the recruitment team and recruitment at Iceland?
I think much as everywhere else really in the world, as this news was getting out there as to what the effect of the pandemic actually was, it was then causing people to, in the first instance, certainly to be panic buying. And that there was a major upturn in terms of sales across the UK in all food retail really. And we went from some of our normal operating weeks to weeks where some of those sales could actually be comparable to our peak times of the year. And what that really meant was that not only did we have to deal with all those additional customers that were in some cases stockpiling goods, but in other cases we're just making sure that they had enough products to be able to get through a couple of weeks within there. And making sure that we were able to serve those, but also dealing with those individuals within our own business that might also be affected by the coronavirus itself and also be absent. So we were in a situation where we needed to significantly increase our population of store staff. Now we went through, and our normal sort of headcount as a business is around 25,000 people. And within those first 8 weeks of the coronavirus all really starting, us going into lockdown within the UK, we had to significantly increase that. And in the end, we increased our headcount by 5,500 people over those 8 weeks. But it created an issue for us in terms of where the stores were actually that busy. We had to come through and allow our store managers to manage the stores. There just wasn't those opportunities where they could be coming out and doing other tasks that weren't customer facing. We needed to be in the position that gave them enough team members within their stores to be able to run those stores, but without distracting them in order to actually achieve that. So what we did was we centralized all of the recruitment at that particular point. We started a campaign that was linked in with the Feed the Nation strapline that was used within the UK. And what that actually did was that created for us in total over that campaign just shy of 300,000 applications. And we were certainly not expecting that number in any way whatsoever. We were expecting circa 30 to 40,000 applications in our first 3 days. We received 30,000 applications in our first 3 days.
So Jeff, that decision to relieve the store managers from the tax of recruitment, which they normally have responsibility for, and centralise, the numbers you're describing of 5,500 people recruited by that recruitment team, which was really repurposed from more head office store roles, leadership roles, to store recruitment. That's 7 right. Recruiters, 5,500, 8 weeks. And I've heard you say never again. It wasn't going to happen that way again. Why is that? Like, why wouldn't you go to the business and say, hey, business is booming. I need another 20 recruiters. This is really helping our stores. Give me budget for another 20 recruiters. Why didn't you do that? Having experience.
Look, we think we probably could have gone to the business. I'm not sure how well they would have received it, to be honest with you, in terms of going, we need this number of recruiters. But I think, we could have increased that headcount in there, but we really genuinely didn't know what was happening with the recruitment, how the fluctuations in trade was actually going to be, how long this was going to last, what else was actually happening with it. And so, yes, we could have increased the size of the team to, doubled it, trebled it, whatever. But that wouldn't have given us the agility that we would have actually needed within there. And therefore, for us, was it a very quick, short-term solution? Yes, it was. Was it a way in which we should look to be operating on an ongoing basis? It just couldn't be. It couldn't be. It wouldn't have given us flexibility.
Why? There's sometimes a debate amongst big businesses because store managers or only hiring managers, that's not their core role, right? Their core role is managing the store, managing the team, engaging with customers. Hiring is sort of this thing they have to do on the side. The kind of decentralized versus centralized model. What's the trade-off of doing centralized recruitment for you?
The trade-off for us was the challenge that we had about the line managers actually taking the accountability for the people within their stores and recruiting those individuals. The biggest burden for us was the amount of admin that was actually involved in all of those situations. And that was the challenge. You know, we had one, you know, we had a situation with that number of applications that were coming through. The admin burden of that was way beyond, and it was something that we could not expect our store managers to be doing. We just couldn't, in terms of
In the
balancing it.
normal course, yeah, in the normal course, Jeff, I know that everyone's experiencing high volumes now, unfortunately, because of
Yeah,
unemployment. And I know with using our technology, we've seen on average around 30 to 40,000 a week people applying to Iceland. And there are stories of other retailers with quite extraordinary volumes. In the absence of COVID and your stores are doing that hiring, how do they do it given the scale? Like, was it a manual process prior to predictive
yeah.
hire, and how did you feel that worked for the business?
Look, it was a manual process that was coming through. You know, we use an ATS called Calidus. I'm really happy with that. The business was really happy with it. The store managers were really happy with it in terms of having that visibility and having it all retained electronically, as opposed to paper application forms, etc., etc. And you know, what they would have to do is, when individuals then applied for it, what the situation was for the store managers was they would then have to go through, review every single application that was made to that vacancy within that store, and then make a decision as to who they would be interviewing as a result of that, and then going through. Now, given the numbers that we were actually having, you know, if even in a small example, you know, some of our stores were getting 100 applications, for a store manager to go through and review those 100 applications to then make the best decision about who they should be actually going through and interviewing at that particular stage, is a really tough job to do. And, you know, we have a team of recruiters within the business that are highly skilled at being able to look at CVs very quickly, applications very quickly, and making some quick decisions around that, because that's their job every single day. But as you've highlighted already, you know, being a hiring manager is only a very small part of a store manager's role. And so therefore, you know, they will have had circa 5-10 vacancies in a year, and when you're not used to doing it in that way, then that's where some of that challenge actually comes into it. And that's what we wanted to be able to do, was to substantially reduce that burden on the store managers of going through and doing that manual process, that actually, you know, can be fraught with danger at times.
So, Jeff, having seen firsthand, you and your team, the pain and the potential risk of bias from relying on CVs to screen, and just the sheer volume, that we all didn't know what was going to happen. Was it going to continue or not? You made the decision to find a solution and find a way to automate that. What were you looking for? What were your criteria when you went out to market and scanned? What did you want to see as the sort of the outcomes for Iceland and the team?
So for us, I think that there are a number of different aspects, and a number of different populations that I felt as though needed to be catered for in terms of the solution. So, you know, first of all, our primary focus was around the store managers and reducing that administration time, and that sifting time that's actually in there. And what we wanted to get into a position of was, with a standard, within a standard year, the number of hours on average that our store managers spend as a complete estate is around about 35,000 hours just going through and doing sifting, okay, because of the number of applications that we have. And we needed to be in a position where we could significantly decrease that. And that's not necessarily about then having direct cost savings. That's then about the point that you touched on earlier, that was then going, if you're not doing the recruitment admin, you then are creating yourselves the time to actually do all of the other elements that you should be doing as a manager, around the engagement of your staff, around the communication of your staff, around the supporting of the new people actually coming on board, etc. So that's what we needed to do, and we needed to focus on with the store managers. But that had to be done in a really, really simplistic way. And that simplistic way had to come through from a seamless integration with our applicant tracking system. And it had to work with that. We could not get ourselves into a position that for the one process of recruitment, that individuals needed to be looking at 3 or 4 different systems in order to be able to complete that one process. So we needed to get into that position. I think the other perspective that I was very much looking at was around the candidate experience as well. And this was an ideal opportunity for us to be able to significantly enhance the candidate experience that we'd actually got at the moment. And we wanted something that would really encompass the brand. And that was a key thing for us. We wanted to give those individuals the opportunity to be able to demonstrate their natural skills and the freedom to do that. But I think the other thing that we wanted to do as well was, we were really conscious, and I was certainly really conscious about, sorry, phone's ringing. Amazon's obviously at the door. I'm not quite sure what's happening at the moment, but I'm going to leave that be. You know, we're also really conscious about that experience for the individuals, and also conscious about the number of people that were going through and actually trying to find work at this particular point in time. And therefore, what we also wanted to do was, we wanted to give something back. So many people are, you know, looking for jobs within the UK at the moment. That scenario is only going to worsen, unfortunately, with what is actually happening. And, you know, the predictions across the UK are about the continuous rising unemployment. You know, last month alone, 792,000 people lost their jobs. And actually, you know, there are people out there that are searching for jobs, and we wanted to be in a position of recognizing that and showing a real high level of support to them, because for so many individuals, as they go through and actually apply for jobs, they hear absolutely nothing as a result of it. They will put the application in, they will be brought into the business by spending the time actually completing the application and putting the thought in. And then in the majority of occasions, they'll get an automated email that says, if you don't hear from us in 3 weeks, take it that you haven't got the job. And that's in a good situation. And actually, that to me wasn't right. You know, these guys are finding it difficult enough as it is, and we wanted to be able to give something back to them that recognized how much hard work that they'd actually given to us. Okay.
I think you mentioned when you said that last time, you said that you've banned within the business and within recruitment any automatic response that has the line, if you don't hear from us, that means you didn't get the job.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, these people are waiting on the responses, and their lives are to a certain extent depending on it, and we want to give that complete clarity to them, and we want to be completely upfront, completely honest. If you haven't got this job and been successful, we'll let you know. We'll absolutely let you know, you know, and that's what we wanted to be able to do. But so we wanted to be able to understand what else could we do to give something back to them. But also, in terms of the third aspect for us, was about the business, and about the business understanding some of those cost benefits that would actually come through with it. So, you know, it was also about being able to give some of those efficiencies back to the business as well. And, you know, even if I have a look at the last quarter's worth of information, which is the first 3 months that we actually worked with you, you know, we were able to absolutely define £96,000 worth of cost savings at that particular point, and that's before the relevant productivity gains that we've got out of it. So you know, those were three aspects that we looked at from a commercial sense and from a people sense. I think the other thing that we needed, and we
on that, Jeff, I did a bit of analysis on the payback for
all
the
right,
period in New South Wales, which is around 11 times, and you're only about just over a quarter in. So I think people imagine that technology is always priced like Workday or success
yeah,
factors. You know, you're not
yeah,
bringing in a whole new system. It's not a multi-million-dollar business, and you know, so I think retail is so cost-driven. It's
absolutely.
beholden to you in your role and any other person leading a business like that, that you look at what is the payback, what is the ROI. So you know, that's pretty powerful for a very commercially driven team.
Yeah, and you know, the final point that we were looking at when we were starting to understand who we could potentially work with and what products that we could actually use, for us as a business, it was absolutely essential that whoever we were going to go in and work with as a partner, that could be on a long-term mutual partnership. It was about being able to absolutely have influence where the product is concerned, but that influence would be about improving it. That influence would be about helping it as much as the business who would be providing the product to us would also be able to help and support and drive the agenda that we wanted to do. You know, the key for us was about understanding Iceland, understanding its pace, understanding its people, understanding its ways, and really getting underneath the skin, as opposed to going, there you go, that's the package, that's what it's about, that's all that we are prepared to offer. So we wanted to have that flexibility in there as well.
So the value drivers, just to recap, was, you know, the opportunity and the need to give back almost 35,000 hours to the business, you know, incredibly powerful, an enormous number. I don't know what that is in a head count. I can't do the maths that quickly, but a lot. And the opportunity to really create a candidate experience that was sort of commensurate with almost your public obligations and the fact that you're a consumer brand. Can I just ask you quite a frank question, which is, we work with a lot of consumer brands, but you know, we're yet to see a consistent quantification by retail businesses and consumer brands of a poor or good candidate experience. I think there's one case study I've heard of in the UK, but you know, does the business really care? I know recruiters do about candidate care, but does the business really see the ROI of, you know, giving 350,000 or 1 million people a year a decent experience, or does it just sit with the recruitment team, that aspiration?
No, look, the business is starting to understand that. It absolutely is. And I think, you know, what the challenge has been previously has been where it was a very manual process. We could never put our fingers on it. We just couldn't understand what that experience was actually like for the candidates. And now we've got the opportunity through the feedback channels on the product. We've got the opportunity through the surveys that go on afterwards as well to actually really truly understand what that benefit is. And you know, I think initially the business probably thought, okay, yeah, this is really nice to do, and actually it fits nicely in with our CSR agenda in terms of really caring for the communities, caring for those individuals that are likely to shop with us, but also likely to work with us as well. And I think initially it was coming from that perspective. However, you know, what we've seen through some of the survey work that's happened with the applicants, you know, where you are now looking at 40% of the applicants saying that they're now more likely to be shopping in Iceland as a result of the experience that they've actually gone through with this, those numbers start to really make a fundamental difference within the business, that then says this is where the natural increase then starts to take us. Now, part of me would like to say the continuation of the increase in sales and the increased performance that we've had is down to some of that stuff. I'd love to be able to say that. I can't put my finger on it at the moment, I'm afraid. I'll have to continue to work on that. But that sort of thing helps. But it's also about, the word of mouth that then comes out of it. And correct me if my figures are wrong, please. But I think one of the surveys that actually came through was talking about individuals feel as though the experience that they've had has increased their levels of self-confidence. And 70% of all of the applicants felt as though they were a better person and had an increase in levels in self-confidence because of the way in which they were treated as they went through this. So it's not just necessarily about those individuals, it's about what conversations they have with their friends, their family as well, that then might in turn create additional customer demand.
Yeah. So for those who might not know, just in terms of the PredictiveHire product, what makes us unique is it's a chat that we call first interview, and everyone does it. It sits at the top of the funnel. And I think what particularly drives this incredible experience, and therefore the brand payoff, is that everyone receives personalized feedback, which is written as if you were having a conversation with a real coach. It's very relatable. I think so far, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, there's sort of close to 350,000 people who've gone through that with, what is it, about 99% candidates at. There's a huge movement out there in the LinkedIn world, I've certainly seen, around candidate care, and we have to end ghosting, that the coronavirus crisis is just creating a growing need to address this issue around cracks in the candidate experience. And I want to sort of contrast the experience that you've had and what you're saying with actually what sits out there in the marketplace, which is when you use AI, you lose the human factor, and you trade off automation and being human. And, what's your experience of that?
Look, it's probably one of the key areas that I talk about from an external perspective, and when I meet fellow HR professionals, etc. It's one of my biggest worries is that we could be in a position where, for all the right reasons of cost efficiency, effectiveness, etc., we rely on the technology, but actually when people come to work, they come to work for managers, and that's what it is. And you have to retain that human touch, or at least for individuals to feel as though that's the case. If I just give an insight that we've had that have come back from an individual that has gone through this process. So, this is verbatim in terms of their comments. I can't 100% be sure if the feedback was an automatic response or personal feedback from a human, but I feel that it was pretty close to perfect. It made me confident in my own pros and cons. So, for an individual to be able to talk in that way, that they've got the gut feeling that it must be automated given what they've gone through, but actually it was so personalized, it was so human in nature, and came through with emotions, with compassion, etc. For individuals to feel like that is absolutely fantastic news. And even if I was to look at, say, for example, some of the latest responses around what they're actually doing, how they feel that they are treated as they go through the process. One comment, this was from yesterday, brilliant. I've particularly appreciated being able to return to the questions, having the chance to express myself. Thought the interview was clear, simple to complete. Enjoyed talking in this interview. So they actually used the phrase of they felt as though they were really talking to individuals that were actually in there. And you know, the chat format made it feel like I was talking to a friend, not being scrutinized, but they were also so concise, and that directed me towards the professionalism of the business. And you know, they were comments from candidates yesterday.
Yeah. So Jeff, for those on the call, Jeff is reading from his dashboard that he has access to through the use of our tech, which allows you to see real-time feedback comments from candidates on being interviewed by AI chat, and then when they receive their personalized feedback, what they think about that. And I think that's one of the things that has been important for you in the business, to trust the technologies, the transparency of that experience. So there's no fear that you'll get some blowback. You know, 1 month later, you can see live every single comment. So
Yep.
Jeff, you've kind of really debunked that one myth that AI and automation kills the human element. In fact, I think what you're seeing is it's kind of the opposite, because it's pretty impossible to give a human experience to 40,000 people a week. There's another myth out there, or at least a very big assumption, which is AI equals bias. And if you use AI, you're going to embed discrimination, going to introduce bias. And as you know, our chat is blind. So really, it's a very effective structural intervention to interrupt bias. And I know that the D&I agenda means a lot to you and a lot to Iceland. Can you just talk a little bit about, you know, how you manage that internally, that I guess perception, and what you've seen in terms of how the technology has supported your own agenda around diversity and inclusion?
I think for me, you know, as well as introducing the system, we actually went through and completely reviewed our entire recruitment process as well within there. We did a lot of work with Calidus in terms of changing what that process actually looked like. And yeah, you know, an aim of mine was to get into a world of having blind recruitment in order to significantly reduce that bias. And you know, the process that we go through now, we literally ask them, for 3 pieces of information, 1 question prior to then going through and going into the first interview with PredictiveHire. But in terms of that, we don't ask them for any background, we don't ask them any details at all. It's just give us your name, give us your contact details, and tell us whether you can legally work in the UK, and that's it. And then they go into that process. So in terms of understanding where that bias can come from, the amount of information is minimal that actually goes through and is used as part of that process. The other thing as well that, you know, we were really careful about as we were going through, and it probably took up the most amount of time as we were doing the build with you guys, was ensuring that those questions were absolutely right. So, you know, the set of questions that we had, and making sure that the questions that were being asked did not lend itself in any way to any form of that bias that would come through or could be answered in specific ways or whatever. But the fact of those questions being prepped in that way, being worked in that way, and then the responses being sifted by your guys with the machine learning that's actually in there, really did help in terms of identifying who those right people are, but for all of the right reasons, because their reasons for being moved forward within the system was because of what they were capable of doing and what their actual talent was, as opposed to everything else that happened in the background. And again, you know, that was one of the key things that I wanted within this particular system, was that it was clearly able to give that equal opportunity for people to come through and work with us, regardless of what your experience or what your background was in any form at all. And that was absolutely key for me. Now, you know, with regards to that, we still have that element where it then goes through to the store managers. But another benefit of the system and one of the concerns that was highlighted by the business, particularly our legal team right at the very beginning, was how do we ensure that we don't do that? Well, actually, you know, you being able to describe very clearly to us about your ongoing quarterly bias testing that you do, and giving that level of rigor to what the AI is actually doing, but also with us being able to go through, and should we feel the need to, independently actually access the answers that were being provided within there as well, really helped allay a lot of those fears, certainly within the business.
So Jeff, we've focused quite a lot on the recruitment side and the candidate experience. You know,
Yeah.
fantastic results, 4 months in, 350,000 people who've been interviewed by their AI chat, 99% feedback. I think the dropout that we're seeing now is what, around 3%?
Yeah, I mean, the
3%.
dropout initially was more, as you know, and you know, we had to spend the time. We had to look at how did we get the message across in the right way in order to reduce that dropout as much as possible. It involved, again, you know, some of those changes with Calidus. It involved some of those changes with you guys in terms of creating some user explainer videos and helping some of that education of the people. And, you know, I think initially there was also a real challenge around people had just never experienced this before, Barb. They just hadn't. And the amount of comments that we still come through that goes, I've never done an interview like this. It's amazing. And, you know, people, I think initially when you first go into it and you first look at it, you go, what is this all about? And it does put some people off. You know, it really does put some people off. But I think, you know, again, that was one of the reasons of going for you guys, was because text conversations nowadays, no matter how old you are, no matter what background you are, etc., etc., it is something that people are used to. Most people have got smartphones, you know, and we know that people struggle sometimes to have necessarily the technology within their own homes, whether that's a laptop or a PC. Most people though have smartphones in order to be able to do that. So
I know. Yeah.
Go on.
So I was just going to add, there's a few people. Thank you everyone for your questions. Just to respond to a few that have come up. So that's why I asked you that question around dropout, because I think people were curious about that. It's 5 questions. You know, those questions, as Jeff has said, are formulated with the organisation, and they're identifying the traits relevant for the role. They're flavored to suit your values. So it's a really terrific way of signalling and embedding your values up front. But I want to sort of ask you, because I know you're very connected to us. I'm often speaking to you and you're in the store or the back of store, one store somewhere. You know, automation only works if the business feels like they're getting great people. You know, what are they saying about the quality of people that are being shortlisted? Is it working for them in terms of saving time?
Yes, it absolutely is. And I think what is also coming through within it as well is it's absolutely broadening the horizons of the hiring managers. I think before, you know, there was a safety net of saying, if they come from another food retailer, then that's absolutely great. We know that they can do the work. If not, they'll have to be from another retailer. If they're not from a retailer, we just don't think they'll work, for example. And I think what I know what the system has actually done is significantly opened up that talent pool. And now we're getting people that are coming into our stores and working exceptionally well from all sorts of backgrounds, you know, whether that's airlines, whether that's cruises, whether that's accounts backgrounds. And because they're able to go through that first stage and then the fit in with the business is right, you know, everything else we can train. We can, we can help them to understand. But for somebody to be able to take the time out to pay attention to the customers, pay attention to their teammates, and understand what makes us work as a business, that's probably the biggest challenge that we have. And that's the biggest challenge that come through. Getting somebody to operate a till is not much different to operating a calculator nowadays. So that sort of thing can be trained, but to help them to feel really comfortable within the business, get a great and deliver a great customer experience, the store managers now see that and now understand that it can come from such a wide background, as opposed to what was, in a way, an element of bias from them that said we can only take people that are from this line of work or that line of work.
I want to ask you, so we work across the multiple regions, obviously in the UK, also in Australia, we work with some of the largest retailers here, and it does seem to be very early stage retail to adopt AI automation, which is kind of surprising on the one hand because AI is so pervasive, across retail and other areas. It's very data driven as an organization. And, I think we're really proud to work with an innovative company like Iceland to really lead amongst your peers in this. And I note on your LinkedIn page, not yours, but Iceland's, it has language like be proud, be brave. And I think actually, you've really led in the market on this. Why? What more retailers? There are others like Tesco and that have huge volumes as well. It's a sector that attracts it.
Mention that name, Barb.
What do you think? What do you think it's going to take for other retailers to, what do you think that the kind of the resistance has been, perhaps amongst, HR, talent, recruitment to kind of adopt automation more quickly, or do you think that's just about to change now with COVID accelerating change?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, and I think for me the whole talent agenda has changed. I think where we were in a position, and certainly from an Iceland point of view, I had my 2 to 3 year strategy planned out in terms of what it was that we were going to do as a business from a talent perspective. Those 2 to 3 years were probably delivered in 2 to 3 months. And that would be very, very similar across a lot of businesses within the UK, certainly. And I think, that's where people perhaps were a bit closed off about it at that particular point in time. This situation has absolutely forced their hands to be going out there and looking at more cost-effective, more efficient ways. And whether that's about because of volume that's actually coming through, and so therefore they needed to deal with it in that way, or alternatively, if certain businesses are in the unfortunate positions that they do need to reduce the costs, then that's where it comes through. I think there are also some myths about AI. I think there are equally as many stories out there about how it can be manipulated as to what the benefits can actually be. And I think, more of that work needs to happen in terms of debunking those myths around that as well, and making sure that people really do understand it. But I think the other element as well is about, much as from another learning and development perspective, and if you go back over the past few years, we've really moved into blended learning around incorporating technology with personal interaction, with social learning, with coaching, etc. What we need to do is we need to help the recruitment industry understand that transition needs to happen within recruitment, and it needs to now become blended recruitment as much as it is blended learning back in the workplace.
And that's right. And AI as co-pilot, I think people fear it's going to remove all the recruitment roles, but it's really about enhancing your productivity and your decision making ability, and obviously also removing the bias. But so I've got one more question, Jeff, and then let's
Sorry,
answer.
can I just add a point onto there,
Yeah,
Barb?
sorry,
Is that all
keep
right?
going.
You know, and in terms of that, when I've talked to my team about it and talked to them about the new technology, because you know they weren't explicit in the way in which you've actually said it there around some of their concerns, but you could feel it. And actually, for me, you know, having the conversations with those individuals and being really clear with them that says this takes away the mundane stuff from you. This allows you to free up the time to spend with the people that you want to be talking to build those relationships, and to make sure that you absolutely know that that's the right person, because you've spent the valued time with that individual, just concentrating and engaging with that individual, as opposed to half of that time now being spent on all of these other tasks that we're going through. You know, that certainly from them was a real plus point, in terms of so many of them are in the business because they want to be talking to people. They want to be genuinely helping people to get new roles and to make the business successful. And this allows them that additional time that's required in order to do that. And I think that's where the balance has to come in, and it has to be seen as such.
Yeah, it's liberating rather than necessarily replacing.
Agreed.
So Jeff, you moved unbelievably fast when you made your decision, you know, after putting that experience of the crazy hiring. And I think we went from conversation to go live. Maybe it was 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and got to do a shout out for Calidus, because we've done a lot of integrations with different players, including many big names. And by far and away, our engineering team loved working with their tech stack the most. So it was a real pleasure to work with them. But as you look back, is there anything you would have done differently, you know, at this point? Other than bring it in sooner.
Other than what, sorry?
Other than to bring it in sooner.
Bring it in sooner, absolutely. Look, I think the pace was at that level for us. In total, it was 8 weeks to it going live. You guys had the systems ready in 6. We could have gone live at 6. The other 2 weeks was about our internal stuff, because as I mentioned earlier, we reviewed and revised the entire recruitment process. So actually the other 2 weeks was us waiting on our own internal IT teams to be delivering what they needed to deliver. And I think, you know, the reason for that timescale was we didn't know what would happen with COVID. We didn't know whether we would go into a second spike or not, whether we would need this really quickly. We were conscious about we would need to be doing our Christmas recruitment anyway. So we wanted a system in that the managers had been able to use, or at least experience, prior to another peak of recruitment that was actually coming through. So hence the need for the speed. Unfortunately, what that meant was that probably some of our communication and some of the experience training that the store managers should have received may have been shortcutted a little bit. And actually, you know, what I would have wanted to have done differently is to have spent more of that time with the store managers, in terms of ensuring that that complete understanding of the system, how it operates, etc., but from a thought process, not just from a operational process that says this is how you use it. Because actually for them, all they saw was one screen that was different. They didn't see and didn't understand all of the workings that were in the background. When the list of applicants came through, previously it was just a list of applicants and they worked through it. Now it was a list of applicants that was in ranked order, that was saying, here's your top 5 applicants that are here, and here's all your other applicants together with their scores to show how they fit in. So for them it was really, really simple, and they were able to go through it, but helping them to understand a lot more of that thought process that I had gone through, that the talent team had gone through, that the HR team had gone through, in order to get us into this place with this product. reflecting on it, I would have liked to have done more of that.
Yes, yeah, you are absolutely introducing change. There's a big part of involving people in that, and communication is key. So we're almost out of time. I'm just seeing there's a few different questions here. I'll just answer a few because they're a bit related to how the tech works, which is it's not a CV parsing tool. We take a view that that kind of data or social media data or someone's behavior is not a fair indication and an unbiased reflection of that person's fit for a role. So we only rely on their text responses to 5 questions. It takes, I think, the number for Iceland across the 350,000 is around 21 minutes on average that people are taking from memory. Is that right, Jeff? How long it takes to do the first interview? About 20 minutes for Iceland?
Yeah, it's about 20 minutes, yeah.
And, you know, people also asked the question, which I get a lot, you know, how do you make sure that it's not your mum and dad or someone smart or with outstanding English who's responding? And it's obviously not video. What we find, this is kind of more anecdotal really, but one of there's sort of 2 ways I would answer it. The first is that chat is really relatable. And so what we see is people feel comfortable. It's not timed and they tend to really speak their voice and share their story. And the way we know that it's you that's writing it is when you receive your personalized feedback. If it wasn't you, you'd be telling us that it doesn't sound like you because we're able to discover your personality. And if you've got your mum or dad to do it, and it turns out they're a very different profile, then you're going to get a very different set of feedback comments and coaching comments. And what we see is really high engagement in terms of feedback and very positive feedback. So, you know, from that we extrapolate people are doing it as them. I think it doesn't feel like a test, does it, Jeff? It doesn't feel like you're being assessed. You're just having a chat.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And we slightly changed our process within our stores for our store managers as well, because, you know, one of the other things that you guys do is you produce a report for the line manager as well. So then they can have an understanding about that applicant that's actually coming in. And you suggest some alternative questions that you go, actually, this is what we're seeing here. This is what we're seeing there. Why don't you ask this question as part of the interview process? So, we give the store managers, the hiring managers, the freedom to be able to select one of those questions and ask it. And I think it would be really, really clear that depending on what that answer would be as to whether or not they actually completed the document or not.
Yes, yeah. Jeff, someone's asked, do you have any plans to migrate to use the technology for recruitment into other groups beyond the frontline team? And maybe, I don't know if you want to share what happened in the early stages around expanding it into some of those other store roles or more intent.
Absolutely. So at the moment, we have got all of our frontline store roles actually covered off within this. We started off with 1 initial model. We've expanded out to 6 models now in order to cater for the differences within the roles. The next area that we are looking at is how do we deal with contact centres? So, you know, we have a fairly extensive contact centre in our head office in North Wales, and that's the next thing for us, is to explore how we can really quickly get people on board, but putting them into situations where they again can express their true behaviours as part of this.
Another question, Jeff, is I know you had a number of technologies you were looking at. We were one, the other, I believe, the other solution was SJT, and someone's just asked, this is SJT, which it isn't. Maybe you can describe why you didn't choose that and you chose the PredictiveHire technology, just to give some insight on that.
Yeah, absolutely. What we were finding when we were looking at other solutions initially, and then as you said, we shortlisted it down that we were working with you and another business, and that other business was SJT's. You know, what we found was, and the feedback that we had from our pilot group within the business, because we piloted both systems within the business, and we used it with exactly the same individuals within the business in order to get views from them. what they felt was that the SJTs and often the answers that were provided in terms of what would you do next, is it this, is it this, is it this, or whatever, they felt as though it didn't accurately represent what the job was really about, and that there were so many different things that should be considered within that, and they felt as though they were being forced into certain areas to be answering it. So yeah, I would do that, but I'd also do a little bit of that. And actually what we didn't want to do was we didn't want people to feel uncomfortable about that. And actually by using this system that enabled individuals to have that open-ended answer, really allowed individuals to express what was important to them.
Yeah, I think that is what people find, particularly if you come from an org psych background. We get asked that a lot, like, how on earth do you extract so much data and insight from 5 questions? Because, you know, the world is used to being asked 150 multi-choice questions, and multi-choice doesn't allow you to have much of a voice. And I think the other aspect is it doesn't give much variance or differentiation between people. So, you know, being open and free form feels like an interview, you know, very much like you wouldn't expect someone to respond in an interview in an SJT way, but you would certainly expect them to respond to an open-ended question like, what makes you great for this role? So the idea
Exactly.
is it feels really relatable and feels very personal. I know we're out of time, but Jeff, I've got to ask, because I've heard that Iceland is pretty out there and innovative when it comes to Christmas, the Christmas food list. Are you going to give anything away? Is there any hints around what Iceland's going to lead with this year on the Christmas shopping list, or are you sworn to secrecy? You can just
No, I'm not sworn to secrecy in any way whatsoever, but I'm going to say that a lot of our products have been endorsed by Good Housekeeping, which is a massive thing over here in terms of what that food is like. But I would just ask and say to everyone, you know, don't take my recommendations, go in and have a look, because your mouth will be drooling.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. We look forward to that. Really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a wonderful day.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Jeff. Cheers. Bye.